At exactly midnight, when the desert wind whispered through the mesquite trees like a warning too old to remember, Jacob Callahan stood on the porch of his ranch house and wondered, for the thousandth time, why loneliness could feel heavier than the wide Texas sky above him. The ranch had been his inheritance, but also his exile. 52 years old, widowed early, childless, and weathered by work and regret, Jacob lived more with memories than with people. That night, though, the darkness carried something new. A sound. Soft. Broken. Human. At first, he told himself it was the wind playing tricks. Then he heard it again, a faint cry, trembling, desperate, nothing like the cry of an animal. Jacob reached for his lantern and his rifle out of habit, his boots crunching against the gravel as he stepped off the porch. The moon was thin, barely enough to outline the land he knew by heart. The sound came from beyond the dry arroyo near the eastern fence, land that brushed the edge of Apache territory. People said to leave that boundary alone. Jacob never believed in boundaries when a soul was in trouble. He found her collapsed near the fence line, her body pale against the dark sand as if the moon itself had fallen and taken human form. For a moment, Jacob froze, not out of fear, but shock. Her skin was strikingly white, her hair silver blonde even in the low light, her eyelashes like frost. He had heard stories of albino Apaches, spoken in hushed tones, wrapped in superstition and misunderstanding. But what he saw wasn't a myth. It was a young woman bleeding, shaking, barely conscious, her ankle twisted badly, blood seeping from a deep gash along her calf. Jacob knelt without thinking. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, murmuring words he didn't realize he still knew how to say softly. "It's all right. You're safe now." Her eyes fluttered open, startlingly blue, clouded with pain and fear. She tried to speak, but the effort sent a shudder through her body. Jacob lifted her carefully, surprised at how light she felt, as though suffering itself had hollowed her out. In that moment, he wasn't a rancher or a landowner or a lonely old man. He was simply another human refusing to look away. Back at the ranch house, he cleaned her wound as gently as his rough hands allowed, boiled water, tore sheets into bandages. She flinched but never cried out. Her strength was quiet, dignified. When she finally slept, exhaustion pulling her under, Jacob sat at the table until dawn, unsure whether he was guarding her, or himself, from whatever this act of kindness might cost. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know her story. All he knew was that leaving her there to die would have been easier. And somehow, easier had never been an option for him. When the sun crept over the horizon, painting the desert gold, the sound of horses approached. Jacob stepped outside, heart pounding, fully aware of how this looked, a white rancher sheltering an Apache woman on disputed land. He had no plan, no defense, no speech prepared. He only had the truth. A group of Apache riders stopped near the porch, their presence calm but commanding. At their center was an older woman with silver-threaded hair braided down her back, eyes sharp with wisdom and sorrow. She dismounted slowly, studying Jacob not as an enemy, but as a measure. "You saved my daughter," she said, her voice steady, carrying the weight of authority earned, not taken. Jacob nodded once. She needed help. The woman's gaze lingered on him, searching for greed, pride, or fear. Finding none she needed, she stepped closer. "By sunrise," she continued, "I have come to claim what is owed." Jacob felt his stomach drop. He understood land disputes. He understood consequences. If she meant his ranch, so be it. He had made his choice hours ago. Inside, the young woman stirred. Her name was Alani. She spoke softly, explaining how she had been attacked while traveling between kin, how her appearance had always made her a target, feared by some, rejected by others. Even within her own people, she walked a narrow path between reverence and isolation. Jacob listened, shame rising in him, for every time he had judged someone by what he'd heard instead of what he'd seen. When her mother returned her gaze to Jacob, it softened. "This land," she said, gesturing toward the ranch, "was once ours. Taken slowly, quietly, generation by generation." Jacob nodded again. He had known. Silence doesn't equal innocence. "You may have it," he said simply. "If it belongs with you, then it always did." The words surprised even him, but once spoken, they felt right, like setting down a burden he'd carried too long. The old woman studied him for a long time. Then she smiled, just barely. "We will not take what is given from guilt," she said. But we will take what is given from truth. She explained that the ranch sat on land sacred to her family, but also that they no longer wanted ownership in the way Jacob assumed. What they claimed wasn't possession. It was partnership, stewardship, a shared future. Jacob felt something inside him crack open, not loss, but relief. Over the following weeks, boundaries shifted, not on maps, but in hearts. The Apache family came and went freely. Jacob learned their names, their laughter, their grief. Alani healed slowly, spending mornings on the porch, afternoons walking the land with Jacob, evenings talking about loneliness, belonging, and how being different didn't mean being alone forever. The ranch became something new, not a fortress against the world, but a bridge. The emotional turning point came one evening when Alani stood beside Jacob at sunset and said, "All my life, people tried to decide who I was. You never did." Jacob swallowed hard. "I was just doing what anyone should." She shook her head gently. "No," she said. "You chose humanity. Most people don't." By the time winter arrived, the ranch thrived, not because of ownership, but because of shared care. Jacob no longer ate alone. The land felt alive again, not just worked. And when people asked about the rumor that an Apache woman's mother had claimed his ranch, Jacob only smiled and said, "She did." What he never explained was that she hadn't taken his land. She had given him a family. And so, the story spread, not as a tale of loss, but as proof that kindness, given freely, never leaves you poorer. Sometimes, it gives you more than you knew you were missing.